Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, who has the worst contract on the Toronto Maple Leafs? And in regards to this topic, when touching on it, most of you, if you were forced to, would pick one of the big four, maybe even more of them. And the majority of those people would either pick one of Mitch Marner or William Nylander, maybe even both. Some of you will point the finger at John Tavares, and I normally don't condone bullying here on this channel, but to those of you that would be brave enough to say Austin Matthews, please feel free to chime in the comment section. So before we start pointing the finger, I think we need to define what makes a contract bad. And I like to look at bad contracts like I do ogres or onions, as Shrek would say. There's layers to them. There's different degrees of bad contracts. Loui Erickson on the Vancouver Canucks is an example of a contract that gets you all the way through the onion. But coming back to Loui Erickson and the Vancouver Canucks here, the next layer of that onion is a guy who is no longer worth the amount of money that he's making and then restricts you from signing players who are worth the amount of money. And when we're seeing in Vancouver is they had to let go of a guy like Tyler Toffoli, who they really wanted to hang on to. They had to miss out on guys like Josh Clevo, who was a valuable contributor to their lineup. They had to miss out on a couple of defensemen that they just had to watch leave, like Troy Stecher and Chris Tanev. They had to watch their goaltender walk to a divisional rival because they couldn't afford it because they got a guy like Loui Erickson making $6 million. But like I said earlier in the video, there's contracts like Loui Erickson in Vancouver where he goes all the way through to the center of the onion. At no point of him being on that $6 million a year deal in Vancouver was he ever worth close to that amount of money. You guys want to make fun of the Buffalo Sabres for signing Jeff Skinner for over $9 million a year for 8 seasons or whatever the hell it was, but at least he scored 40 goals one year for them. And the last layer to this onion of a bad contract is the player being next to impossible to trade. So the final layer, the very core of this onion, is that the only way to get rid of this contract is to either bury it in the minors, to buy the contract out, or to load it up with a bunch of assets and sweeten the deal to get rid of it. The Patrick Marleau deal from Toronto to Carolina is a perfect example of that because the only way that the Maple Leafs could part ways with this guy is by sweetening the deal, and it just so happened to be a conditional first-round pick. And I don't care. You can tell me that, yeah, it was beneficial to buy them out because the cap savings were worth it. But this is the absolute worst scenario that you could ever get to. This is worse than having a guy like Loui Erickson on your team because there's examples of guys like Loui Erickson bouncing back. James Neal traded from Calgary to Edmonton. What did he do? Did he have 19 or 21 goals this season? Yeah, the guy had 19 goals in 55 games. That's a 28-goal pace. James Neal, before this season, was in the same category as Loui Erickson. He fit every single layer of the onion that I described to you guys. But there are examples of guys like James Neal and Loui Erickson having bounce-back years when they're put in the proper situations. And sure, maybe James Neal's contract is a bit of an eyesore on the Oilers cap-friendly page. Maybe he's not worth $5.75 million, even if he does score 28 goals for them this season in a full 82 games. He's still giving them some sort of value. That's worth at least $3.5 million. He's not overpaid by that much. So when we're looking at the big four there, they are still contributing to the Maple Leafs in a very, very large way. Are they holding the Maple Leafs back from adding the necessary components to finish off this team and make them contenders? Well, it's yet to be seen, but yeah, I would say that they're overpaid individually on a case-to-case basis by about 5 to 10% each. And I don't care if I offend people by saying this. If you're of the opinion that any of these four guys are not tradable or the Maple Leafs would need to buy them out or retain salary on them, because we're going to talk about retained salary in a second here. If you're of that belief, you probably belong to the same subsection of fans who value the eye test over advanced analytics. And there's nothing wrong with having that opinion. But if you're going to honestly say that the Maple Leafs can't trade one of these guys, they would need to buy them out or retain salary on any of them or take back bad contracts, we're clearly not watching the same game. We're in a world right now where a player's cap hit is not as important as the actual money that that player is making on a year-to-year basis. Because NHL teams in the NHL, it's a business, and lots of businesses are hurting financially right now. So who cares if the salary cap ceiling is $81.5 million? If you don't have $81.5 million, what do you got to worry about it for? What you're going to be worrying about is the actual salary here. And Austin Matthews, because he was already paid out his signing bonus this year, if the Maple Leafs were to, for whatever reason, want to trade him, he's owed $27 million over the course of the next 4 seasons, because this year hasn't started yet, and that's an average of $6.7 million a season. Are you going to pay Austin Matthews an average of $6.7 million over the course of the next 4 seasons to score 40 to 50 goals for you every single year? Hell yeah, you would. Any team in the league would. Same thing with Tavares. He was already paid out his $11 million signing bonus for this season, so if the Maple Leafs were to try to trade him, he's owed $34.1 million over the course of the next 5 seasons. That averages out to about $6.8 million in real money, actual money that is owed to him over the course of the next 5 seasons. Are you going to pay John Tavares $6.8 million on average to score 30 to 40 goals for you every single season? Maybe even more than that. I mean, he scored 47 goals in his first year in Toronto. The real money owed to William Nylander over the course of his contract is $5 million a season on average. You going to pay William Nylander $5 million a year on average to score 25 to 30 goals for you? I mean, I don't know. He was on pace for 37 this year and over 70 points. So, yeah, you probably would pay him that much on average. And the same thing with Mitch Marner. He's owed on average $7 million a season over the course of the next 5 years in real actual dollars. So are all 4 of those contracts movable? Yes, they are. And you wouldn't have to buy them out to do it. You wouldn't have to retain salary or even take back a bad contract or add a sweetener on top of it to get full value. Sure, you'd probably have to be taking money back in the deal, but the players that you're taking money back on are probably going to be good players. So if none of Matthews, Tavares, Marner, or Nylander have the worst contract on the Toronto Maple Leafs, then who is it? Justin Holl making $2 million for the next 3 seasons is not necessarily the greatest. If Kyle Dubas would have waited, he could have got this player for cheaper. Is he a top 4 defenseman? No, he's probably a number 5 or a number 6 on a contending team. The absolute worst contract on the Toronto Maple Leafs' books right now is the Phil Kessel contract. At least, if this was a bad contract, a guy like Loui Erickson, there's the potential to have him Milan Lucic for James Neal swap, and the James Neal guy is on pace for 28 goals. This is exactly what I was pointing out with the New York Rangers. There was no way of getting rid of this, no matter how hard you tried. You couldn't pay a first-round pick to get rid of that. It's just stuck there, and there's no potential of it giving you any sort of value whatsoever. It is dead weight, tied to your ankles, and you're in the middle of the ocean, basically. The hilarious thing is that if the Arizona Coyotes were to buy out Phil Kessel, the Toronto Maple Leafs would still be hit with $1.1 million against the cap this year and next year, and an additional $50,000 just for shits and giggles in 2022, 2023, and the year after. If you were to ask Kyle Dubas if he regrets the Nazem Kadri for Tyson Barrie and Alex Kerfoot trade, he would probably tell you yes, to a certain degree, but the original Nazem Kadri trade, which was nixed by Nazem Kadri, he said no to the deal because he had a limited no trade clause, was going to be with the Calgary Flames, and the Maple Leafs were going to end up with TJ Brodie and Mark Jankowski. If you were to look at both deals, TJ Brodie and Mark Jankowski, Tyson Barrie and Alex Kerfoot, the 2 best players in those deals would have been TJ Brodie and Alex Kerfoot, and the Maple Leafs ended up with both of them anyway. It's a Mickey Mouse roundabout optimistic way of looking at it, because you could easily say, well, they signed TJ Brodie as a free agent. They could have kept Kadri and signed Brodie as a free agent, and having Brodie and Kadri would be better than having Brodie and Kerfoot. Yes, in an ideal world, yes, that's what would have happened. But you know what? Sometimes you can't always have your cake and eat it too. And I'm not saying that he would regret the full Phil Kessel trade. That needed to happen. They still did get back good assets for Phil Kessel, but I'm saying he would regret having to retain $1.2 million against the cap in this deal more so than he would the Nazem Kadri deal, because at least in that deal, he ended up with the 2 players that he wanted the most out of the 2 trades that they had in front of them. Because if you're looking at Kyle Dubas' cap-friendly page here, he's listed as the Maple Leafs' interim general manager at the time of the Phil Kessel trade, and I guess he would have been interim general manager alongside assistant general manager Mark Hunter, so both of their names are on the Phil Kessel trade. But if you needed another reason not to like Kyle Dubas, he's partly to blame for why there's $1.2 million of retained salary towards Phil Kessel on the Maple Leafs' books right now. And just for the record here, I don't think that Dubas has done an amazing job as general manager of the Leafs. I also don't think he's done a bad job either. It's somewhere in between the two. If you catch me being more optimistic or more lenient towards him, it's just because I like being optimistic. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Make sure to leave a like on the video if you did like it and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. Damn, I can't believe they're still retaining on Phil Kessel.